Of Wyoming, Steve Fontanini, who's been around for a long time, done a lot of good work all over the country, and he's going to put on a good show for us. Please join me in welcoming Steve Fontanini.
So thanks for having me. It's kind of exciting. I haven't done a demo in a little while, not for blacksmiths anyway. I just did about 6 demos this summer, but just for groups of people and the historical society and stuff like that. Oh, I'm sorry. So anyway, most of my work is pretty much architectural. I do work in a lot of houses, lots of railings and lighting fixtures and all kind of fireplace stuff. I do some sculptural work. I still shoe a couple of horses now and then, and, which gives me something to complain about constantly. And I sell these anvils. I made patterns years ago and have them cast down in Salt Lake for me. And I sell a couple photographs a year. So anything you need done, I'm going to be working at the Mini Mart part-time also, just because it's got to have something to do. So anyway, a lot of the stuff I do is a little bit larger material. A lot of these houses are pretty big. So, and say if it's a log house, sometimes the logs are that big around, big giant things. So you can get away with using bigger material. If you stay with 1/2-inch squares and all that stuff, you can't even see it in the house. So I've kind of geared myself a little bit that direction. Some of the stuff we'll do 250 lineal feet of railing inside of a house. One job I had a few years back was 13,000 pounds of bronze, and it was 247 lineal feet. So lots of birds, chiseled a lot of birds, and a couple thousand leaves, blah, blah, blah. So it took 6 of us 6 months to do that job. So, I mean, using bronze, you burn up your first piece or two, but after that you get pretty handy. Probably a lot of you guys have probably worked on bronze before. So anyway, I'm going to work on this piece today once we get a fire going. This is 2.5-inch square, so I'm going to taper it. I've never made one of these before. Yell a little bit. Yeah. So I'm just going to run a taper on that thing and hopefully end up with enough material up on top there to pull out some kind of elliptical disc. So that disc will be 1/2-inch thick, give or take. And we're going to go from 2.5-inch square to probably 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 square at the top, and then have the disc on top. Try to do it all out of one piece. And then I'll hammer that that's going to be an indentation, probably 1/4 inch deep, give or take. It'll be on the front side of it, and we'll just put a little leafy kind of thing to fill that up a little bit towards the end. If I even can get this done. This is the fire we're using, so it may take a while to heat that piece of steel up. It will take a while to heat that piece of steel up.
Steve, you said you like to work with bronze. Which?
I don't know if I like it or not, but I do it.
You work with bronze. Which bronze do you prefer to work with?
I kind of like that silicon bronze. You can do a wide variety of stuff with it, so it welds pretty well, better than most of the others if you're going to weld it. And if you can forge, you can just forge the heck out of it. So I like that about it too. And it doesn't burn up quite too much. So, and I don't know how much non-ferrous you guys have forged over the years, but a good trick when you're heating it up is you can't go by color. If you get red bronze in the fire, you're going to pick it up and it's going to be in pieces. So you just keep heating it up and take your hammer handle and run it on the surface of that thing and do it cold. That's what I tell everybody. Do it cold and see what it feels like. Put the thing in the fire heat it up and get it where you think it ought to be, and then run your hammer handle on there. And if it feels like you just ran it over some Vaseline and you get a little teeny wisp of smoke, that's the temperature you want.
No color.
No color. You can get by. I've pulled them out of there and had some red, and if I just keep my patience level correct and sit there and wait for it to go away, then I can forge it and get away with it. If I start forging it right away, it'll crumble apart. I use gas. I've got about a 48-inch square coal forged brick and I use coke. It's really hard to find anything where I live. Coal, coke, propane, it's all expensive and hard to come by. So I use a lot of gas. So I've got like 6 gas forges. One of them's 2 foot squared, about this tall, and long one. I do a lot of rail cap, part you grab a hold of, and forge different cross sections. And so that one's about 32 inches long and about that big around. Then I'll call them my main gas forges, are Spanish Lake Forge, I think they call it. They make some really nice gas forge. I got about 3 of those. So all the rest are homemade.
You ever work stainless?
Yeah, that's something that's a hateful situation. Yeah. That'll make you drink copious. Yeah, we got done what we were supposed to get done. We were slitting and drifting holes through inch square bars, and boy, that like hurt. It's really painful. So
How did you heat it?
I threw it in the gas. We tried coal. I couldn't tell a difference.
And it doesn't take a color either, like bronze.
Right.
You don't really get a color out of the stainless.
Yeah, I got some color into that, and I watched one guy, and this is a long time ago, and he'd heat it up and forge it, and then he'd heat it up and let it set, or he'd dunk it in water, because he was annealing after every time he forged it, he annealed it. So I
tendency to work hard.
yeah, right. But I don't mind cutting a few corners, so sometimes we didn't anneal it very often. But it worked. Everything worked with it. But I kind of cringe when they want stainless. So try and talk them out of it. Oh man, that stuff's $20 a pound. Don't do it. So, man, we got to get a big fire going. We're not even really coked up yet, are we? Okay. So it's going to be a while. We were talking so much about buffalo heads yesterday when he's making them buffalo heads. So when I was a kid, I used to hang around near Custer, South Dakota, and I worked for a guy that had about 200 head of horses, and he had about 400 cows, and I was like 12, between 11 and 15, and for all those years. And anyway, there was one big kid, he could drive and stuff, and he had a little Jeep, and his mom made choke cherry wine. So there was like 3 of us, and I was the youngest. So he'd steal a bunch of that choke cherry wine from his mom, and we'd run out in his Jeep and go look for an apple grove somewhere out in the Badlands somewhere. We'd pick a whole shitload of apples, and we're drinking that wine and driving around. And about 2 in the afternoon, when it was nice and hot, we'd start looking for a herd of buffalo somewhere out there in the middle of nowhere. And we'd always find one. And so we'd be driving around, bouncing around like this, circling that, looking for the biggest bull in the herd. And he'd back that Jeep up to that biggest bull, and the other 2 of us would stand there and start chucking them apples at him until he'd get all pissed off and stand up, and then he'd start chasing us, and we'd be bouncing through the prairie. I'm sure that there would be helicopters descending nowadays to attack us.
Just don't name him Cecil, right?
What's that?
Don't name him Cecil.
Right. I got another one too that's really almost as disgusting. I used to, in the 70s and 80s, where I live, it was always hard to find work. So I mean, selling a hook for me was like a big deal in the 80s. And anyway, so I'd have other jobs. I'd shoot a lot of horses in my life, but in the winter I would snow machine in and out of Yellowstone, taking people, tourists, and so we're in there, and I got the family and the kids and all that stuff, and so we're up near Black Sand Basin, and this herd of buffaloes crossing the road, so we stop, and everybody walks up there, and they're, you know, reasonable, that far away. We're not going to get attacked or anything. And they're all standing there, taking their pictures and all that. Well, this last cow comes sauntering up over the hill, and she's just kind of plodding along. And here comes this young bull, and his nose is up in the air, and he's got snot blowing out, and he's hauling ass, you know, making all kinds of grunt noises. And I wasn't sure, truthfully, I wasn't sure what was going on. And he come up over that hill, and I saw something hanging down underneath his belly. And he took a couple of big licks on her and jumped on top of her, and she just kept walking along like there was nothing going on. And I mean, I just had to walk away. The mothers were grabbing their children and stuff. But I didn't belong in the tourist business. So we may have to switch to gas, don't you think? We getting any color at all in there? Any color at all? No. All right. Well, we could light another forge up, and I could make something small out of something.
So is that bronze in the fire, or is that steel?
No, it's steel. Piece of bronze like that at $9 a pound, I don't know, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So with projects like that, do you have a power hammer you use in your shop?
Yeah, I've got 2 power hammers nowadays. I got a 200-pound self-contained, it's a Williams in white. And then I got a 300-pound Chambersburg utility hammer. One thing I've learned over the years at elevation, like this is around 6,000 feet, right? So you lose like 30% of your compressed air. So I've got, I think the Chambersburg is supposed to use 73 cubic feet per minute. So however that calculates out, I did buy, I think it was a 65 cubic foot per minute air compressor, which took, you know, an hour and a half to load all the tanks. Got 10 hammer blows out of it. Then you got to sit around and wait another hour and a half. So now I've got 3 air compressors running. I got over 300 cubic feet per minute, and it runs it pretty good. You couldn't put your foot on the treadle and have it go all day long, but you can get, you know, you can work on something like that till it's time to reheat.
My assumption that propane burns differently, or natural gas is also differently at these elevations, because it seems like at sea level or closer to sea level, it seems like my propane forge just worked a lot better, a lot hotter.
Yeah, I mean, at my elevation, which is the same as here, I run them pretty high PSI. I mean, just because I've got 2 tanks. So I got about 950 gallons of propane available, and I just run full tank pressure.
So you just up the pounds per square.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
That's what it was.
You can drill out the orifices a little bit. That'll help get a little more gas in there also. I've never bothered with that, and when we've made the other forges, that long tubular forge, it's got 6 burners in it, we made that one, and we drilled all the little holes at I think number 68 drill bit. So, and it works pretty well. Most of them work pretty well if you keep the liners somewhat fixed up. So when I reline something, I try not to forge weld in it for 6 months.
Where do you line yours?
Well, it depends. It depends which one it is. So I've got doors on the big one, and the doors I use a castable refractory, and inside I've got some 2-inch KO wool and fire brick on the bottom. And I just buy boxes of insulation, big rolls. Those Spanish Lake forges, you buy a kit. I think it's $175. So it comes in, you got to file off, take a rasp to it to get them to fit in there. If you're setting up a forge and you're using stiff insulation, that's great and everything, but don't put them in for a tight fit. You want it to kind of fit loose, so when it does get some heat going, everything expands, as we all know. You're going to crack your liner like your first heat, unless everything's kind of a little bit of a sloppy fit. So.
Where did you learn blacksmithing? How did you learn?
Well, I started doing metalwork in high school, and the boss there, he wouldn't let us forge much, but we used to get to watch him. And then I went down to, in the 80s, I went down to Russell Swider's shop in New Mexico, Rowe, New Mexico. And pretty much other than that, coming here to things like this and working I was around Null Putnam for a little while, and I went to the Penland School once. So, and a lot of 2 o'clock in the morning time in my own shop. On my property, I've got, for a small piece of property, I've got a bunch of outbuildings, and I've had a shop in 3 of them, and I had to build, the shop I'm in I built in 88, and, but I spent a lot of nights in there, just making stuff that I've never made before, and so I don't really think I'm self-taught or anything. I've learned a lot of stuff. There's another man named Bob Larison that lives down near south of Rowe, in between Rowe and Santa Fe, and he's a pretty handy guy. He'd get frustrated though, so you wanted to kind of give Bob some space when he got pissed off, because he wasn't afraid to throw a 3-pound hammer through the sheetrock. So I've learned a lot from Kevin.
Yeah.
The business end, that's where I fail the most. He does good in the business end. So, yeah, so charge for your work. Charge a lot of money, as much as you possibly can get away with. Don't be afraid. I'm only getting $100 an hour, and that sucks. It's because it's hard, you might go for a stretch without a job. So of course I go work at the mini mart or shoe a horse or something like that, but normal people I don't think would do that.
Is the economy of your area holding up pretty well?
Pardon me?
Is the economy in your area holding up well?
Yeah, it's kind of bouncing back right now. We had a few years where it was pretty rough. Oh, it is? Hey, nice. Let it go for another minute and all. So I'm going to just start a taper on this thing.
What size hammer are you going to use for that? A 16 ounce or a 24 ounce?
Yeah, I was thinking a 24, maybe a 32. I don't know. I have some hand hammers here that I do. Do I have a hand hammer? Huh. Well, what's in that bucket over there? Nothing? I thought I brought more hammers. Well, I do know how to use a hand hammer. I've even made them. But this is a little bit on the big side, so we might do some striking later. I don't know how smooth I'm going to be able to get it under this hammer as far as the smoothness of the taper. So we might have to do some hand work. So I'm just going to start. I'll just pull the taper, start on it. I'm going to bring the end down. The way I pull a taper is I'll work the end pretty much till I get really close, and then I can kind of blend everything in from there on back up the hill. And using a power hammer, I had them for years, and at one point I had 3 little giants in my shop, and things moved around a bunch. I've had a Champion, just stuff I found over the years and sold and fixed up and sold and whatever. But it took me talking to Bob Bergman to really learn how to use one. You kind of want to work that front edge and just nibble away at it when you're, yeah, right. Maybe, you probably all know that, so, but it took me a while to figure that one out. So, and then you can come back in and smooth it off. I've got a wall about that long and about this high up the wall, about 5 or 6 deep. It's just solid power hammer tools that we've made over the years for different stuff, cutting and poking holes and just whatever. I don't even know what you call 90% of them. You just kind of fake it. And, there's those few basic ones that everybody probably has. Flatter, and butcher, we call it. So certain things, everybody's got that, but we got a whole bunch of weird stuff. Most of them are handheld. I've got quite a bit of bottom tooling, and then some spring dies. I do a thing also where the dovetail, and a guy from Pennsylvania showed me this. So there's the dovetail in your hammer, and you just drill a hole all the way through it. So normally the die would come up another couple inches high. So you just cut that off so that it's just flush with the sow block or whatever your hammer type is. And you've got this hole that goes all the way through. So then you make, say you're making a rounding type die or a drawing die. Then you weld an ear on here with a hole on both sides or both ends. And that sets down here and you bolt it on. That's a pretty quick way of getting them on and off. If you're needing a top and bottom die that match. And it's a lot of spring dies. I don't know if you ever had a spring die break on you. I've had a few break. It's really frustrating. And so maybe I'll make a spring die, and then as soon as it's done, I'll cut the spring off and I'll do this to it. And then I put it under the hammer and get it all lined up. Whatever I made the spring out of, I'll put that in between the two of them, put it in the hammer, and then I can weld these ears on and it's all lined up. So every time I come back and slop it on there. So I've got a bunch of those, not a heck of a lot, but some. One of the big tools I'm really kind of proud of actually is something to make tenons with. So normally you butcher and you turn it all the way around and you cut in and then you start drawing it out. Maybe you'll make a spring die that'll turn it squared around, whatever. So I've got a set of dies that's basically like that, and it's got the ears on it. So over on this side is the butcher. So there's a knife blade coming down on top. So you can go in here with anything, say 1.5 inch square or smaller, and just cut. You can put stopper blocks in so that it only comes so far together, and then move it over to there and tune it up. So you can do like 150 tenons, say 3/4 inch tenons on an 1.5 inch square bar. You can do 150 of them in less than an hour. You can rip right through them. So on stuff like this, I make out of H13. These are also, as I recall now, you can unscrew them and put in different heights and all that stuff. So I get a little carried away because we've been in such a hurry. Seems like starting about 1989 in my area, things are like in this big massive rush. You don't get days off, and you're 5 jobs behind all the time, and everybody's calling you in a big old hurry because we're rich and we want our shit today. So I got people in there that aren't really getting trained every day. You don't get time to go over there. Okay, well, grab the hammer this way, and you don't get time to do that. You gotta get some shit built, So something like that makes it improve somebody's skill level like right now. So anyway, I'm going to pound on this for a bit. Thank you. Stay some away from the end. Yeah. Yeah, I think that looks good. So we'll get there. We'll smooth it. We'll keep drawing it out. I'm going to use most of that. See if we can get somewhere around that tall. We'll get it out there, and then I'll separate. We'll get it out there a couple more inches, then I'll separate a lump for that, a little disc thing on top.
The constant rotation really contains the spreading to the side, doesn't it? The constant
Well, it's
getting your length but not spread. So.
yeah, and that's what you're going to get, no matter what you do. You have to calculate a lot of that stuff in, like when we're making handrail cap or something like that. You know, if I take an 1.5 inch round bar and I make it into a particular shape, a simple shape, say we smash it to 3/4 thick, it ends up about 2 1/8. I kind of leave it, the edges are round like this, and it kind of has this really kind of nice, gentle movement to it, kind of like that. But you know, that's where it's going. It's only going to go so wide, but it's going to grow in length about 15%. So I don't know what from 1.5 to 2, I don't know what that percentage is because I have no math skills. But the way the hammers work, whether they're drawing dies or flat dies, it's pulling it out lengthwise mostly. If you want, you can spread it out, of course. No, I'm looking for that. It's kind of a peen, cross peen looking thing. It's about that big. It's bigger than that, actually. Maybe it's in that other one. Yeah, I bet that's it right there. Yep. Thank you. So this is, let's just call it a spreader. It's kind of the cross peen on your hammer, your hand hammer. So if you've got a long bar going in there and you want it to get wider, just put that on there and start working it side to side. So, and you can do that if you've got drawing dies. You can come in from the end of the hammer and just move it across on the drawing dies. I'm kind of a flat die person, so both of my hammers, a 200-pound hammer, I think is pretty standard to have like a 3x6 die. For years, when I got that hammer, I had some 4x8s made, and that's what's in there. And I've got, this is just spring. It's off a Peterbilt or something like that. I use a lot of spring, and I use H13 for a lot of stuff. And I use mild steel, like maybe more than any of it, because I'm a tight-ass son of a bitch, that's why. But it's, I use stuff, I mean, you all know about Rob Gunther's soap and salt thing. I use sodium hydroxide. Nasty stuff, but I don't care. I think that it works better than the soap and salt. And it doesn't go bad. The soap and salt kind of goes bad over a year, 6 months. So I use sodium hydroxide, and it works really well. There was a time many years ago that I did some actual experimenting around, and it's cheap, it's easy to use, and I just have a fan up there, and I kind of do that, and I'm still alive, so it's not that bad. It's ready. Thank you. Oh, thank you. So this is a flatter, power hammer flatter. You can use it this way, and you can see the way it's shaped. You probably know this, but it'll handle whatever kind of angle you've got on whatever you're doing. You can also use it upside down and use it kind of as a fuller. I use it a lot like that, on like a shoulder, get in there real tight and push the shoulder, or right next to the shoulder, to work that material out. So I'm just going to start smoothing this thing up. A lot of times in my shop, there's usually somebody working there with me. There's been a woman by the name of Martha Preston that's worked for me about 15 years. And she's kind of a dynamo. You want to stand back when she's around, let her get her job done, or she'll just run your ass over. But we work together on the hammer. Sometimes she's holding it. Sometimes I'm working the tools and the hammer, and sometimes we swap around. We've had numerous times over the years, I've had like 6, 7 employees in there, and we'll have 3 people all working the same hammer and the piece of steel that's going with it. And it's actually kind of fun. At least I think it is. Better than that. Like now, I spend a lot of time by myself and just in there, tap, and over here, which is fine too, but it's kind of fun to go get coffee, take a break. So we might have to, those dies are pretty sharp, so we're getting a lot of die marks on there. So I'll try again with that flatter with a nice heat, but we might have to do it on the anvil with a regular flatter and somebody swinging a 12-pound hammer. Yeah, you're the man. And let me get some water on that too. I'll do it. I got nothing going. Yeah.
I get it.
All right. So we're in my shop for years. I wanted to have a dirt floor, and I did, partially because I'm cheap, and partially because I thought a dirt floor is what a blacksmith shop ought to be. And my country's pretty rocky. I don't know what it's really like around here, but you know, it's like 5 rocks this big and a teaspoon of dirt. That's like what we got. So anyway, I had a railing. I used to have 2 8-foot-long tables, kind of end to end in there, and I had a railing on there, and I picked it up and took a step back. I just needed to move it a couple inches, and I tripped on a rock back there, and that railing kind of pinned me to the floor. And I'm like, I'm getting a crane in here. I don't care what I got to do. And then I poured a floor finally. And it's a little more beat up than this, I must say, because we got water in there. The handle, you saw me dunking, the heat's running up that handle. So my concrete doesn't look anywhere near this good. And it's nowhere near, it's not even 20 years old. So we do put some work through there. So we're going to smooth that up, and then I'm going to knock those corners back. But I think before we do that, I'll separate a chunk up here, and we'll. Yeah.
As far as dressing from the striker's point of view, the spacing, what angle you can use?
The biggest one. Well, we could come.
Okay.
So I'm going to use this for a fuller to separate that chunk of material. You could use a spring die and do top and bottom or 2 sides at once. Doesn't matter. On a larger piece, it really doesn't. On a 4-inch thick piece, it just really doesn't matter, because you're not going to push it off center very far. So we'll just use this. And if somebody wants to hold on to this thing, that's not going to bother me all that much either. Okay, cool. So before we get too carried away, let's heat up that end, and we'll separate that right now. Yeah, go back in there. Keep going. Keep going. You got it. Wish we had another, I just don't have a spring die. I didn't bring a spring die. It'd be nice to make a journal the easier way or the straighter way. We could make one. Oh, that's it. I'll just show them. So here's another, here's a spring fuller. I won't use it. It's set up. This is part of the way it gets held in place. You probably have all seen that. On the bottom die, I've got a wraparound thing and big Acme screw on it and holds it right in there. This is kind of a rough one. It's been changed around and all that, but I've got a couple others that are actually nice with a flat bar on top and bottom, and they're a little more accurate. But I try not to use these too much because they're kind of a pain. I'd rather just use a single top tool. Seems easier, have more control over it. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So that should be enough, eh? All the way over. Okay. Yeah, let's go back and let me hit it one more time. Okay, now straight up. Let's just run through them all now. That's good. Thank you. Okay, so that'll separate our little piece, and I think I'll work some of this taper down to it at this point, and probably work down in here too a little bit. Yeah, let's work that tip first, and I'll get that going in.
So what's the relationship of the depth of the fuller? Is it strictly eye appeal? Does it have with the amount of material you want at the end of it? What?
Yeah, I'm just separating enough material, whatever, and I'm guessing. And you would do it by volume if you're going to do it a math project. So how much volume is in that cube up there versus how much volume is going to be in the final thin, you know. Yeah, I don't like math either, but so this will be close enough. We'll get it spread out. I'll get that taper in there, and then that'll just separate it and give it more a smaller base underneath it, and we'll try to get that taper out. I'll probably leave that little cube just the way it is till after we do some of the other stuff to the shaft of this thing, because once I thin it out, spread it out, I don't want to burn it up in the fire. Now we are using coal, so you could keep it out of the fire where you cannot in gas. So I you know, something like this, I would be using gas, there's no doubt about it. So I got to keep that in mind when I'm building, which we all do when you're building something. Do the thin stuff as late in the job as possible so you don't melt the thing. Kevin. Oh, we need a flatter.
What's that?
We need a flatter. I don't have one. I forgot. So you can see where we're at. We're starting to get pretty smooth up in here, but I want to get that down so we get rid of that last little fullering mark. We'll reheat. No, you're all right.
So you took your fuller down to the size of the diameter.
Say that again?
You took your fuller down to the size of the diameter you wanted to connect to that bowl.
Yeah, I mean, that taper's just going to come down and smooth right, so that's bigger to begin with. And then I'll have to use that, this cross peen deal to, probably to spread it out. So if you take a cube or a longer block of steel and you stand it on end, so an example is I was at a shop in Northern California. They had one 28,000 pound hammer, they had a 12,000 pound hammer, they had a 4,000, a couple of 250s. I don't know what the hell they did with them. But anyway, they were taking blocks of steel that were like 14 inches square, about 36 inches tall. And they put them under that hammer and they smacked them down to somewhere around 6-8 inches thick. And then they'd pick that up and they'd put underneath it bushing, I don't know what else to call it, with a big ass hole in the center of it. And they'd punch, and they'd set a big punch on top that was just a round block of steel. And they'd drive that thing through there. And then they'd take it all apart and put a bigger bushing underneath, big hole in this thing, and set that donut that's this thick and this big around. And that's my point, is when you take that square and smack it down, it becomes a disc, nice and round, and if you do the math correctly. Anyway, so then you've got this big donut sitting up there. I don't know how many tons it weighs or whatever, but then they set an even bigger plug on top of there, and they drive that through. Well, the bottom bushing, the hole is even bigger, so and the top plug is a little bit smaller, so it forces that material through there. So what you have, you've got this disc with this flange sticking out like that. So it's three-dimensional basically. With a hole. And your thickness, whatever the thickness here is that's what the thickness here is. Maybe just a little bit thinner. I didn't get a lot of those particular technical details from those guys. It's pretty noisy in there. But I have a kind of a funny story. I went there with this girl, and she drove, and a friend of mine, about this tall. And we're standing there, and the forklift's running around, and there's 5 guys in this crew, and the boss is standing there. He's deaf as a post. Anyway, we're just visiting, and he's telling me what's going on in there. And so the forklift grabs one of these things and puts it in there, and the guy's working. They've got these 2 giant levers he's working to make the hammer thump. And it was getting so loud, even for me. I was like, holy shit, this is bad. And I just looked over to check on this girl, and she's like gone. And I'm like, and there she is. She's hauling ass, man, as fast as she can go, just like this. It was pretty funny. We didn't last too long. I don't know why that is. Okay. Thank you. Not too hard. Get light. Beauty. light. Okay, thank you. So that's getting pretty close. We'll leave some of that. A lot of stuff, sometimes I got to come in there and file depending on what the transition from the top of this taper to our disc is going to end up being. I'll hammer as much as I can on the anvil, possibly even under there to get the shape of this thing. But Noel Putnam always said you can take a nice piece and make it great by doing a little file work. So take that any way you want. But I'm going to smooth this out. We're a little bit, our taper, we're a little bit narrowed down here for the thickness up here. So this needs pulled out a little bit more right in this area, which will shrink that down, get rid of some of those flaws from the edge of this and edge of everything else. Same area. Thank you. So we're getting close. Close to what? I don't know. Oh, so I need something. Something sitting there. Oh, there it is. So we're getting close, pretty close. I'm gonna, that indentation, I'll lay it out and I'll probably use this. This is a horseshoe creaser, fullering tool, whatever you want to call it. And what I like about it, I have a bunch of other tools like this. One side is not only beveled this way, it's also kind of round this way, where the other side's straight. So if you put this round side on, say, I want my straight edge, one of those straight edges, I'll put the round side opposite that, and that'll help push that material towards the center. So then when I come in into the field inside there and push that material down, it'll go down. If it didn't push that material towards center, then it would create a shunt. So we don't want that too much.
How much spread are you anticipating when you go in and make your recess?
Well, I'm guessing we're going to end up maybe a quart wider, give or take, because it's also going to grow in length.
Right.
So, but I don't know. I'm just, like I say, I haven't built one of these, so I don't really know. And I didn't stay up late last night and do the calculating on anything.
I knew you said that.
Yeah.
What you were anticipating.
So that we used to have Martha, this woman, she was a calculus major in college. She was really highly intelligent. Her brother works for Boeing. Her other brother works for JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Her father's been an astronomer, not the goofy person, but the guy looking through the telescope for like 50, 60 years. So these are brainiacs, you know, and here she is working in a blacksmith shop. I don't understand, but anyway, we used to, so once she started, after she worked a couple years, she decided that she wanted to do some calculating, figure out cosine and sines on staircases and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, have at it, baby, you know? And so that got us going into competing. So she'll figure out volume on you figure out the volume on a finished piece of the volume of material, then you can figure out what size of block of steel to start with. Just get the right volume and then start hammering on it till it's in the right shape and the right size and all that. Anyway, so we started a big competition that she would go for 45 minutes and calculate whatever the hell we were doing. And I'd look at that and go, okay, whatever. And I'd walk over to the scrap pile and dig out something and say, okay, this is what I think. And we were always like, sometimes she was that much better than me and sometimes I was that much better than her. So I don't mind guessing. What the hell? What are they going to do to you if you're wrong? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to tune that up a little bit. Dan, do you mind holding this? Or would you rather someone else?
No.
It starts to get warm about right there. It just, yeah, back just a little bit. Right, ooh, perfect. How's that look? Okay.
A little,
Gets a little big right there.
I see a little bend down it toward the head there. Yep.
All right, thank you. So that's pretty good. Right up in here. We're getting a little narrow here for the whole taper, but I'll start some up in here and kind of work that in, and we'll get it going. So power hammer wise, and I know yeah, I think right in there. Yep. Yeah, mostly in the big stuff. So power hammer wise, took me a while to figure this out too. It's not how hard the thing hits, it's how much control you have over it at all times. So if you got a little giant or something that wails away like a big dog, but you can't get it stopped, or you want one blow and you can't do that, build the brake. Just build the brake. I mean, it's not that it's a day out of your life to build a brake for a little giant and make it a perfect power hammer. I've had guys, I've done a lot of demonstrating in Montana and Idaho, and guys will call me up and say, well, I want to get an air hammer. I want to get an air hammer. So, well, what do you got? Do you have something? And he's like, well, yeah, I got a 100-pound little giant. I'm like, you got a 100-pound little giant? Geez, there was a time I'd have killed for one of those. And you should just take the time, okay, you can take the day and build a brake for it, or spend $10,000 or $20,000 and get an air hammer. I don't care what you do, but I think you ought to build a brake for it. So some of those guys have even called me back 6 months later and said, I built that brake and I bought beer instead. So I'm like, yes, I'm so proud.
Steve, one thing I've had trouble with a lot has been forging in like you've done, where you've fullered and you've got the mass there and then you're hammering behind it, is things getting out of square to one another. The mass on the end ends up twisted in relation to the square of the rest of it.
So he's talking about on a taper or something where there's a mass on the end like we're doing, and he's working behind the mass and that ball keeps twisting or something. Generally speaking, when you go into the power hammer, whether it's from here or here, if you go in straight, in theory, you're going to be okay. If you go in even a little bit crooked, you're going to turn this trapezoid. And if you're turning this trapezoid, whatever's on the end is going to get kind of messed up. So then you got to come back and stand it up and really kind of massage it, and try to push it back to square. You probably all have gone through this, but it's kind of a pain. So that's the only thing I can tell you, is either you got something going on with a hammer where the dies are maybe not perfectly lined up, or you're just enough off to where that's probably, I would guess that's what it is. And I'll tell you, my hammers are not perfect either. One was built in 41 and one was built in 46. My 200-pound is a self-contained, it's that Williams white one. And it just kind of, when I first got it, it did this. I mean, I was like, oh, it's going to be great. And I had a job lined up for it. And, I forget how many thousands later, but thousands later, a month or two later, it was running. So, but it took me a while, and I've since taken the hammer out of the ground. It's a two-piece hammer, so that means the concrete foundation, there's what they call an anvil pit in there. So you got when you cast your concrete, it's got to be 2 foot below the floor surface, and then you stack wood in there, and then the anvil sets in there. So anyway, you have to go through all that stuff. But the tune-up on the hammer, when you get it set in there, there are things the way the hammers are built so that everything's pretty much lined up when it goes together on a two-piece hammer. But what I've learned since then is that isn't 100%. So you got to be able to take the body of it and twist the body one way or the other. And the same thing with the anvil. When you put the anvil in the ground, you better be throwing your level on it all the way around and making sure that it's somewhat flexible this way, so that when you set the body over the top of it, your dies will line up and they're level like this. I mean, for years, all I did is I'd take a little drop of oil and put it on all four corners, and then just have the hammer come down real light and see, okay, you know, one's too big, one's too small, whatever, to try to get the thing level. So I don't know, I've talked with Clifton Ralph on the phone a few times. He wouldn't know me from Adam. You know, I've sat there and visited with him and got him going on politics and stuff, which is a big mistake. Don't do that. But
Depends on which way you lean. Right?
yeah, right. So anyway, so I've gotten a little bit of information from him on, because it's repair stuff. That's what you want to know about on those, and setup stuff. And there was a couple other guys that, yeah, I worked there back in those days, blah, 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 but they couldn't remember how they operated, and I just didn't get a lot from them. So you just kind of got to feel your way through it seems to me, or find somebody. I mean, there's Daryl Meyer, I think is his name. I think he's a handy power hammer guy.
Mark Krause.
Pardon me?
Mark Krause.
Don't know him, but I believe you.
Bill Cox is a guy.
Oh, Cox, yeah, I remember him. And of course, Bob Bergman, although somebody said last night he's retired. I don't know. But what's that?
He still answers his phone.
Oh, he does? Okay, well, maybe he's not. Pardon? There's a truckload of people that know a lot more about power hammers than me. So call them up if you have a problem. That's one thing about living where I live. There is now more than ever, but there's never been a blacksmith community. There's no junkyards. The closest junkyard's 150 miles away. Kevin's yard. He's a major collector of everything. But it was never that way before. And I mean, I would drive 12, 14 hours just to go listen to somebody talk, just because there was no choice. Thank you. So that's pretty reasonable at this point. We'll do some flatter work. I'm going to also knock these corners back, just bevel them off nice, pretty wide probably, at some point, but I don't think I'm going to be able to use that power hammer to do that, so I'll just do that by hand because there's too many of these. Most of your dies, you really want at least a 1/4 inch radius on the leading edge on your flat dies, and like mine are 3/8 on the leading edge and the back edge, and then the ends are about a 1/4 inch radius. It just seems to make more sense, and you don't get dents like this. So some other famous person, sharp edges and forging don't get along real well. So let's do that, and then we'll use a flatter for a while. Yep.
I'm watching your back.
I don't know what else to say.
Steve, how are you going to do the top disc portion?
Well, I'm going to heat that up by itself and start spreading it out with this, side to side and up and down, and then we'll come back in on the edges and pack it what I would call pack it back in to get the outer shape. And I'm kind of going for a pretty square edge instead of, it's when you smack it down, it's going to have that general radius all the way around. And I'll probably try to get rid of that everywhere I can, just to have a square edge. Because there's going to be a lot of squares here. Each corner will be beveled, and then the sharp edges of that indentation. Then we'll see if I can get a decent little outline of an anvil forged in there. That'll be fun. Oh yeah, thank you. I've been doing, the last few years, I've been doing a lot of Celtic knots and stuff. So I'll add them to something. Like, I've got a bench in there. It's made 1.25 inches by 7 flat bar. Anyway, so there's a spot on there. I didn't do it to that, but there's a good spot in there where you could just put a nice little Celtic knot or a bird and dog kind of deal. I just have that. I just like the Celtic stuff for some reason. I'm half Irish, believe it or not, but I do like some beer once in a while.
Irish whiskey.
No.
No.
I'm really kind of an asshole when I drink that stuff. So good, and I'm not big enough to be an asshole.
You ever twisted pipe around kind of like barbed wire? Have you ever done that?
With pipe?
Yeah, with pipe.
No. I just imagine it caving in constantly. It'd be real kind of a pain in the rear.
Okay.
I've done some pipe forging over the years. That blacksmith's helper, I've seen one around here. You can kind of full her down and
Make a cup out of it or something.
yeah. I still kind of go back to solid material. Good or bad, right or wrong, I still kind of like it. I've had only one back surgery because of it, so that's not bad. All right, what am I doing now? You want to hold that? Do you mind? We're just going to smooth. Come on in. There you go. How's that look to you? Okay. Maybe we'll do some flatter with a hammer, regular hammer. Thank you. We're getting there. Kevin, when you're ready, we'll warm this up and we should be able to get it pretty smoother with this.
Items like hand tools, platters, things like that, or even tongs, when you need them in your shop, do you prefer making things yourself? Do you just purchase them?
I make them.
You make them?
Yeah. If tongs, I do make tongs, but they got generally bigger sizes. So the small stuff, and if I'm at something, I'll buy some tongs. I'm all for it. But most everything else I just make. Whether I do a good job of it or not, or use a good steel or bad steel, I don't. It depends. That all depends on how big a hurry I'm in. If I'm really running behind on the job or what. But I kind of also, I mean, a lot of those big blocks of steel that we use for V blocks or round bottom swedges and stuff, a lot of times I don't even heat treat them. Just use them. Whether I'm using them on an anvil or under there, doesn't matter. So every job, you know, it's really, every job you're making new tools. It's always that way. I don't know why. Even if it's a similar design, you got to make something new. And I've been doing this railing. It's really simple, but there's the cap, the part you grab a hold of, just so everybody calls everything different, but the main supports we call balusters, and the littler ones in the middle we call pickets. So, and then a lot of times the designs I go with, there's a cap, and then a horizontal top bar that's right under the cap, and then a bottom bar. So I've been taking the two bars and they end up looking like this. And then the picket itself, so this is our horizontal bar. This is a big divot here. And the end of the picket kind of has a corresponding dent that goes in there. And then we just throw a rivet through there. And I did two that were very similar, but I still had to make 3 tools for the second one, and now I'm doing another one. Everything's bigger, everything's huge, at least I think it is. So I'm making all new tools, and it's going to be the same attachment and everything. So you're always changing something around.
The railing caps look difficult.
What's that?
The railing caps look difficult.
Well, it depends on what it is. That one, and other people make some of this stuff too. That 1.5 round becomes that cross section just by flattening it off. So you just kind of work it. You do have to straighten it, so I've made some bottom tools and top tools so that I can stand it up on edge on one of my planting tables and tap it and get it so it's pretty nice and straight. You're getting, this edge is a little bit wavy, but that's part of the charm of it. And you can work it and make it perfectly straight and make it look like it came out of some rolling machine. You can do that. I'm not doing it, but you can. So that's a really simple one. I've got a couple other cross sections. For years I made 1/2 by 2 into that shape. And I did a railing about 150 lineal feet, and they had tapered wooden posts every 4 feet, every 6 foot, whatever. And we took that rail cap and bent it out around them like that, all the way down the stairs and on all the balcony runs, and bending that stuff, going up and around a 90-degree corner. That'll test your ability to not cuss.
Hey Steve, on the square 1.5 or 2-inch square on the diamond compressed, makes a real clean,
Yeah.
fast, profitable handmill cap.
Profitable. There's the key word, right? You ready? Ready? A little big up there. Need a break? Want me to swing?
No, I'm good. Unless you want to.
Let's call that good. Thank you. So that's pretty smooth. We're a little bit big up in here, so we're going to take a heat up there and try to get that to come in. Then I think we're done with that part of it. So like from here to here.
Just the very end.
Yep. So what was I talking about? Was I talking about anything of value?
What's your truck setup? Have you got a specific vehicle you use for when you build a job site? You have multiple vehicles?
No, I just have one. I just have a flatbed truck. I don't have.
Trailer too?
Yeah, I've got a flatbed trailer. I'm into the flatbed thing because you can load it with a forklift. A regular pickup you can't. Plus, I still, in the 70s and early 80s, I floated a lot of rivers. Got paid, got drunk. It's perfect. Anyway, I still do that kind of whenever I possibly can, so throw on whatever you want and go, you know. I don't have a, I used to shoe horses full time, and I had 2 trucks. I kept one in back east, and I would fly to Pennsylvania and shoe all those horses. I spent about 2 weeks doing that, and then I'd come home, and in theory I was home for a good month, maybe 5 weeks, and then I'd go back. Never worked out all that great. I'd end up in Kentucky, or I'd end up in California, and then I'd end up at home or something. But so I did have 2 specific trucks for that kind of work, but I never had I've stayed pretty flexible with the truck for my shop, just because I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
I'm curious, do you take your forges with you sometimes? Do you find yourself needing to do that? Use rosebuds and things like that for heating?
No, I bring a forge along, but I have a big old rosebud about that big. But over the years, I think, like in the 80s, I would probably bring a forge and an anvil to a job site much more often than I do now. And the main reason for that is math. We can go out there, Martha and I got this system, whatever it is we're going to build, you know, whether it's a staircase or railing or whatever we're doing, we can just, if it takes us 4 hours to measure something, and if we don't make too many mistakes, of course, but we can go home and pretty much build it. We might have to spend another day and a half making small or full-scale drawings, as small as we can. But then you can just stay home and build the thing and not have to go back and forth. And even on some fairly difficult spiral situations, spiral type things, I usually do make some kind of jig. I used to use Celotex years and years and years ago, but have switched to masonite, 1/4-inch masonite or 1/8-inch masonite, and you can cut it and bring a jigsaw. And you know, when we work out of town or have in the past, I'll ship a bunch of tools if we're going to Texas, I'll ship a bunch of tools down there, and then when we fly down there, the tools show up, and we just start doing our thing and measuring. And H is this big thing with us, measuring all the calculations on a stairway, we put letters to them, and H is the it's kind of funny for us, it's kind of stupid really, but all stairways have the line of nose of tread line. So if you're going to have a baluster, the center of the baluster is going to be there, and maybe it has to be up a little closer to the nose on that one. So the measurement from the top of the tread to the nose or to the line of the nose of treads is our H measurement. So did we get H? Did we get H? Because you can't calculate your height without it. The height of the cap and the height of everything else. So, you're ready? What am I doing? You're ready. I'm never ready. Kevin, you want to, or do you want to get somebody else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, here we go. Thank you so much. Well, not too hard.
Okay.
Lighter?
Harder?
No, no, lighter. Good. Be happy with that. Good. All right, I'm going to be happy with that taper, and I hope you are as well. What's that?
Tickled.
Okay, so if you could try to start up there and work as long as you can down this way. So next thing, I'm going to bevel those corners, and I'll use this hammer. And I don't know what I made this out of, but it seems like a good hammer. Could I grab that? Thank you.
Been around a while.
Yeah, I don't know. 3 or 4 years probably.
Steve, there's been some people coming in late. Do you want to explain to them what you're building?
I'm building a little sculptural thing. It's going to look kind of like this. This right here. We're going to put an anvil up here, and then there'll just be a couple of leafy type things up here that come down. And I'm going to doll up these two sides a little bit with that. We'll run a creased line, and then we'll poke like a center punch on either side of it like this. And it kind of, if you put enough of these in close enough to the creased line, it kind of gives it that illusion that that line is doing that. You've probably seen that detail a lot. Yellen used to use that a lot. I've seen it on other people's work. I've used it on a bunch of stuff. It's just kind of filling in some space. That's all we're doing. So, and that's what all we're doing when we design anything. What's the definition of design? Arranging objects in space. I don't think I even made that up. So anyway, that's all we're doing every day when we build. As boring as whatever it is we build, or as exciting as it is, we're just arranging objects in space. And hopefully someone will pay us the big bucks. Not yet. Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll just get burned. Thank you. Sorry. Yep. So we're just knocking the edge back and giving it another small minor facet to to bounce light off of.
One thing, Steve, too, that I don't think, maybe a lot of people don't pick up on is the way that I was trained. When you're drawing a taper or you're doing what you're doing, where you're knocking the edges down, you have a hit and a move and a hit and a move and a hit and a move, and you're not always hitting the same spot over and over and over. So it's kind of one of those functions you have to figure out. Patting your tummy and scratching, rubbing your head.
Yeah, I mean, you're not just standing here doing that. I mean, in theory, they say this is the dumb hand, this is a smart hand. So you might be swinging this hammer and it's hitting the same basic place, maybe, but you're moving that steel every time.
Exactly. Your hammer stays in one place, but the steel actually comes in and out. And I see a lot of people just hitting the same spot.
Well, you got to get, good blacksmith is ambidextrous. Ever heard that one? So try top tools, left-handed. What the hell? You won't dent your anvil, but just play with it. If I got 200 pickets, say, you guaranteed 50 of them are going to get work left-handed by me, just because I can't drink beer all day, so I got to try to do something worthwhile. Part Irish, right? The part with a bad heart is Irish. I have this family heart problem, and it's kind of funny. I'm half Irish and half Italian. So the people that have been doing this research on this heart thing have traced it back to like northeastern Italy, up somewhere around Venice or something. Just, I don't know how they do all that stuff. Anyway, but my Irish grandfather is the one who spread it cheerfully throughout the rest of the family. So we just had a family reunion. All the Irish people and everybody came. It's like 70% of us have it. One of us is on the heart donor list. Another one, last Tuesday, the day my dog died, they took his heart out of his chest, laid it down, did some filleting to it or something, and put it back in. He lived through it and everything. He's a mechanic up at the mine in Minnesota, so he might even go back to work. So after the big reunion was over, I was like, nobody died. That's great. No, that's perfect. Close enough. So yeah, electrically. I do that a lot on stuff so I don't have to use tongs. So if I got 50 pieces of 2-inch square, 3 inches long, I got to do something to. I'm going to be going through my scrap pile looking for whatever I can. And then, when they're done, I can cut them off and transfer them. And just easier. So I kind of want to let this cool so we can get in here and mark the next step. So let me see if I got the right tooling for the next step. So I think this is good enough for now. You know what I don't have is well, maybe I do. I think I have a round one though somewhere. Yep. That'll work. Okay, we'll do the easy ones first. So we're going to do our lines with the little dots on either side first. So let's see. If we could heat about right there. If somebody would hold this for me, because we need to obviously keep it flat on the anvil. And
Want me to hold it for you?
sure, you bet.
Where do you want me standing?
Well, yeah, that'd be great, provided the little lump of steel won't hit that. You know what I'm saying? Because if it hits that and I hit over here, it'll bend our taper.
Okay.
So we'll just lay it on there and see. If it works, great. If not, then we can swap around or something.
Steve, can I see that top tool, please? Thank you.
So you want to make your tools, power hammer tools especially, in proportion to not only the work that the size of the work you're working with, but the size of the hammer you're working with. That thing I made to reach over down pretty deep on a 3 and 4 inch thick stuff. And I'm so lazy, even on small stuff I'll still use it, where I probably should be using a tool that's that tall instead. Have more control over it, but it works.
Okay, I'm gonna bring it out here with the knob on the end over here.
Yeah, and we'll just see if it'll stay flat on the anvil. Oh, I want to go down the middle on this one. Yeah, we're good. So I'm a little off center, so just look the other way. I've got to grab a glove. Yeah, I threw something somewhere. That'll work. Thank you. Thank you very much. What am I doing? So we were talking yesterday about creasing lines. Because this is a horseshoe and creaser, I'm going to run it both directions. That'll give me a little bit wider groove. But when you hit it, you lift the handle up, drag it, keep that point in your groove, and then set it down. This is just a bob punch type thing. A little cold for my forearm. Let's warm it up.
Is that creaser chisel sharp?
No. It's 30 plus years old, and when I originally made it, see that crack?
Yeah.
Goes all the way through and all the way across there.
Wow.
But I don't know why. I try to break it. Maybe it'll break today, but it's still going. Is there water? No. You know, I don't know what it is. He asked if it was H13, and I really couldn't tell you what it is. I've never sparked it. Which reminds me too, if you want to know what something is, I collect little bits of steel that I know are a certain thing. You probably know this already, but get a stamp and stamp on it what it is, drill a little hole and put it on a ring of wire, and then keep it over by your grinder. So the unknown thing shows up, and you grind it and match your sparks.
Do a lot of hand punches and hand chips with flats on them.
No, I did this a couple years ago when Mark Asprey got hurt. He was coming here. Anyway, he went to Livingston, Montana later that September or something, and they asked me to demo when he got tired. So I thought, well, hell, I'm gonna try that. Because usually I just put a really nice flat spot on there so it doesn't roll too far.
Sucker rock.
This is spring.
Those flaps are definitely an Asprey.
Yeah, yeah. So I got some in there that are that way and some that aren't. Ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Am I ready?
Same size.
Yep.
Time for a handle tool.
Yeah, I do. I make them all kinds of ways. I gotta, you know, you can never bring enough stuff. Especially when you're indecisive on what you're gonna do. Steve was talking about gloves yesterday, and I got every glove known to man, and they all wear out and they all burn through, and so the guy gave me these, so this is what I'm using right now. Let's warm it up.
Steve, whenever you get to a stopping point, we'll take a break.
Oh,
Change dates.
can I finish this row? We'll straighten it out, finish the row, and straighten it out. Cool.
I've got a question.
Pardon me?
It's probably being honoring, but what is the pedigree of a Bob punch? Why is it called a Bob punch and not a Henry punch?
Not a Henry punch?
Or a George?
You know, I don't know the answer to that.
I'm surely curious.
Right, and I don't know the answer to that.
Does anybody?
Old men have told, that when I had black hair, they used to call it a Bob punch. So I don't know. I'm thinking it's a European thing.
Probably.
I mean, most of our blacksmithing knowledge came from Europe, and we lost it at World War II. What do they call that? The death knell of the blacksmith? Somebody did. So it's nice that we're all here trying to keep it moving along, you know. But I don't know the name of maybe somebody, those guys at Williamsburg, I was always really impressed at their intelligence, their skill, but also their knowledge of history of blacksmithing and tools, and stuff like that. Maybe one of them would know, Peter Ross, or I know he doesn't work there anymore, but some of those guys that worked with him gotta still be there. Maybe you guys, I don't know anybody. I mean, I don't know anybody. I stay at Hoback Junction and, you know, stagger around my yard, so I don't know anybody, but I bet that's who I'd call if I was really needing that information.
Oh, no, I don't care.
Yeah.
You haven't done a lot of brushing so far on your
No.
Do you like the scaly work? You just use a
You know,
side grinder later? Or?
no. We should be brushing, and I'll usually, when I've got a long way to go like this, I'll wait till my last bunch of heats and then brush. But I didn't bring one because I'm not all together there most of the time, so.
Yes, sir. I'll work the brush for you.
Maybe take a break
Now?
after this heat.
After this, yes, sir.
Steve,
Yep.
I just asked Clay about the bob punch
Oh.
because it's shaped like a plumb bob.
Oh. Cool answer.
Yeah, but a plumb bob has a point.
Well, that's true.
It has, it's straight down.
Okay, last heat, and then we're taking a break. These are fun too. Thank you. These get hot even faster. I didn't want to say that to them. Put the bottom up. Where's that? Put the bottom up.
There you go.
Okay, roll it over. Well, we're done. Those catch on fire, but they're nice gloves too. So we're supposed to take a break. Take a break.
Let it soak, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
Trouble is now you hide it in the fire so it can't come look.
Take it out.
So, how do you convey the lightness? You know, the tempo of the strike as far as how hard. I mean, the striker should know what the material's doing also.
Yeah, and you should feel it and stuff, but a lot of that comes from working together for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to talk to you. Maybe you can't hear me.
I have earplugs in.
Okay, so I'll try to talk louder.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, it's going good. You're not hitting too hard.
Right.
And it was once you hit too light. I'd rather have a person hit too light.
You can step up from there.
Yeah, right. 'Cause then I can yell out, hit it harder, God damn it. You know, but, so yeah, don't.
No, it's fun, the teamwork.
But when you see that top tool come off of there and generally lay it down on the side, you know you're done.
Okay.
No matter where you're at.
Okay.
So that's about the main thing you're watching for, because you don't want to hit it without that top tool. And if you're using a hammer, if the blacksmith is using a hammer, he hits and you hit directly right where he was.
Yep.
And you try not to thunk the hammer hits.
Yeah, I had a year of it on the bronze project.
Oh yeah,
The
you were
Cisneros.
right.
Yeah, we made that hammer, and it was just, you know, it's an honor to strike, but
yeah.
it's also you have a lot of knowledge you need to be
Right. You're
how
not
it's
just
moving.
you're not just a power hammer.
That's right.
You're thinking. That's his
Exactly.
whole job. No matter if you're the guy sweeping the floor, you got to be thinking about not only sweeping the floor, but how you're going to push somebody out of the way to get working on an anvil.
Yeah.
So you got to show what you're watching, what you're learning just from being across the room.
Yeah.
Everybody here's got to do that. Otherwise, what are you doing in life?
Well, that's the question.
Over and over again.
Well, that's awesome about the family reunion. And nobody died.
Nobody died.
Yeah.
Whenever you go to a family reunion, make sure you take a suit because somebody might die, and you got to have a suit.
Right.
You got to have a suit. It's too bad that you've never been a striker before because, you know, I could learn a lot from watching a striker. Look at this guy.
We can pass it around if you don't mind.
I don't care.
Holy stuff.
Well, next
film.
You're into film?
I'm into film and video.
That's all that really matters.
Exactly where
Right,
I'm
you're
at.
right behind the camera.
Yeah, that's all that matters. Marketing, man.
I was there. I can charge another $50 an hour.
You think I don't?
No, I think you do. I'm jealous.
The problem with sitting in the camera view is when you start falling asleep after lunch. You're in the camera view. It's like
profile.
and everybody sees you for years.
So you're going to open that up?
Name tag is parked on the other side. And then you can be on the other side and you have room to work still and everything.
You got really good form striking.
Is it too high? I can't see where you're holding it, so I'm trying to cool it.
Oh, I would, if it was in the wrong spot, I'd say so. And you've been cooling it down pretty well, so we're good. We're doing great. I think we're getting it where we want it. It's good and hot.
Straighten out a piece, because this would get in my way. So I
I just hope I'm not too boring for these guys.
I did what you've done. What you're saying is, you don't know how to table.
When I went to Canada to do this, the second day the head guy came up and said, hey, these guys are here to relax, so let's just take a break every hour or so. Let them get some coffee and visit. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay.
Having that on the other side, I would find a little.
So you're not going to do this? Well, I guess the show you were doing is gone now.
Yeah, but they started a new one.
Yeah.
But I'm not, I wasn't going to do any shows last year, and I ended up doing one in Cody. I made this 250-pound Morris chair, 2.5-inch square legs, and owls, and had somebody do the nice leather seats and stuff, and I brought it over there. Thinking, oh, it's kind of westerny and this and that. Didn't sell.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, it's in my living room. I was going to bring it, but I got to take the front legs off. It's wedged together, or at least the front legs are. I don't even have a good photograph. Oh, that's a problem. 1,000, 1,500 of my photographs.
They're just gone?
Gone. Computer.
So you don't have a backup drive? That's what you
I have 2 of them. But I spent 2 8-hour days on the phone with the Apple people, and we couldn't get it figured. And then I was like, man, I got to get some work done. I got to go back to work.
Well, there are companies that can retrieve it, but it's not cheap. Although the technology's gotten so good that it's much cheaper. It's in the like $200 range. It used to be in the $2,000.
Oh, it's worth $200. It's worth $300, $500 to me.
There's places that can actually disassemble the drive and then operate it with their own system and get the data back off.
Well, I need to, because it's all those years of work gone.
Yeah, because I have a terabyte drive that's totally separate off the system, and it every day it dumps what I've chose to back up on the whole network in our house onto it.
Wow.
So even if we had a strike or something, lightning strike or something, the odds of it getting both.
Right.
But even if it did, it's not. You can still get the data back off somehow. I'm an Apple phone person, but I always had PCs because that's what the company had.
Oh, I see.
And they sent me to A+ school to learn how to build them, so that we had this huge, sometimes 15 jobs going, and each job had a superintendent, a couple foremen, and sometimes a couple of project coordinators.